Now, Renita, since last week, it's been a lot of mess.
A
A
lot of
lot.
mess.
I mean, every day, obviously, it's just a snowball of more and more things. But this week, I mean, I don't even think we have enough time to cover all of the things. But let's start with the simple fact that, at least from what I've heard, a lot of federal workers are being fired. Is that all federal workers, only certain departments, ones who can answer the email to prove that they have done what they have done in the past week?
No, you're right. People are haphazardly being fired. The federal workers are. And there's been a lot of back and forth because Trump has said that he's going to fire all these federal workers, which he's already started to save money in the budget. Obviously, that is not going as he intended because the courts just told him this week that he cannot fire hundreds of federal workers that he had planned to fire.
But what happens between the time of Trump making these bold statements and doing something like that and the time of a court's response? You got this gap of time of whether people are going to comply right away with
Mhm.
what's going on. Like, what date? Like, I guess I don't understand the choice that some people are faced with. And you're talking about federal employees, so people in certain positions that I think should know maybe their rights around, their employment and state of employment. From what you're hearing, are people complying right away, or are people kind of starting to push back?
Well, people are definitely pushing back because a lot of folks don't know this, but federal workers are, there is a union that takes care of federal workers. So that's why the courts just told him that it was unlawful to be firing the federal workers the way that he did. But to your point, yeah, they have fired folks that they weren't even sure what those people were doing within government, and they had to try to ask them to come back. And they don't even have the contact information for a lot of these people.
Oh
So
my goodness.
it's a complete mess. But the larger thing I think that, folks want to focus on is that people frequently talk about across the country that it feels like the middle class is eroding day by day. The federal workforce are, some of the most stable, well-paying jobs that really have been the last stronghold of the middle class in the country. And I don't like using the word middle class because I don't believe in classism, but
But
that's
even
what.
what is the middle class these days?
Right. And that's how people commonly refer to it is middle class. And so this has been the last like stronghold of really seeing the middle class. So that's why this really, has a large effect in addition to the history of what the middle class has been, particularly for Black Americans in the country.
Oh boy. So that federal job ain't no longer the ticket to have that good old federal job with your pension and your retirement and all these good things. But it's like not only are they just willy-nilly getting rid of federal employees, but now there's been, what is it, an executive order that trans people are to now be booted out of the military?
Well, yeah. So you're bringing up another thing that happened this week that totally doesn't make any sense. Now, make it make sense.
Right.
I can't make sense of it, so maybe you can. But
I can't make sense. The reason why I can't make sense of it is because knowing what we know about this country, some of you may know that, I was also in the military. I was in the Navy. But this was before I transitioned. And this was also during the don't ask, don't tell space. But they asked and they forced me to tell. They hung me out of a third story window. It was a very traumatic situation. But this was after I had already proven that I was willing and able to do the job.
Mhm.
And I just remember being in boot camp and like after crawling under barbed wire and jumping into a pool of 100 stories, take my pants off, turn into a floating device. After doing all this stuff and showing I was capable,
Mhm.
everybody was there so emotional watching this video as they're like, "You did it, you graduated, what have you." And I just realized I did all of that for a country that is not going to protect me.
No, you're right. So this week, what you're referring to, the Trump administration decided to tell the Pentagon that they have 30 days to identify everybody who is transgender and serving in the military, and that they have to remove these folks from the military. Now, the thing that's crazy about this is number one, we have heard that military recruitment has been down for several years, probably almost a decade at this point. At one point,
Girl, don't nobody want to do that.
and so much so that around 2022, they had to pay folks like $50,000 sign on bonuses to get people to enlist. So we really do need to be keeping folks who are doing their job well. The way that the memo was written is insane. It basically
Because
talks.
there's like a some sort of exception.
There, you can only stay if you're transgender. You can only stay if you get an exemption.
Okay, what's the exemption?
The exemption says unless they can prove, someone can make a case that you are really important for war fighting, duties. That's the only way that you can stay. But even if you do get to stay, then you have all these extra requirements that you have to do to stay. For example, demonstrating for 36 consecutive months that you are stable in your gender. Like, what does that even mean?